LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the April 1st edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's 14 best, most newsworthy, informative clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. I put the two topics I'll be covering down in the video description. First, the normal Trump administration roundup from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I'll also have to take my political comedy from the corporate media sources, and I'll be adding in AM Joy, the actual first political comedy is supposed to be political comedy, and then there's one other clip that I'm labeling political comedy that's not really supposed to be comedy, and later on there's one that's a little comedic but it's kind of dark humor that'll go into the second topic. The two topics I'm covering, I mentioned the normal Trump roundup, and then the second half of the clips are devoted to news here in Sacramento. The STEPHONCLARK 2 weeks ago tonight was the victim of a police shooting that's caused a lot of protest and unrest and community backlash, and there was breaking news last night where a sheriff's department SUV hit a protester, and that was covered briefly in the Sunday morning news analysis shows, and I'll have some extra clips, and it's an issue. I mean, I don't want to center myself and overplay my involvement, but it's an issue I've worked on over the years, and I do know some of the players, and I have some insights that I'll share with you when I get to that second topic. So it's a big show here, two different topics, and like I said, I'm going to start with the AM Joy intentional political comedy here from AM Joy this morning, where she was having memories of Sean Spicer during Easter's past from the Trump administration and from the George W. Bush administration over here.
Every year, the White House hosts its annual Easter egg roll, but this year's 140th egg roll will be missing a certain special spice. You'll recall that before he briefly and painfully served as Donald Trump's White House press secretary, Sean Spicer had the distinction of being the White House Easter Bunny. Let's take a trip back and remember the time.
My real name's a secret. My friends call me EB. My special job means I must hide my true identity. It says world's best hopper right on the desk.
So that's the idea.
So sorry for that little bit of ad there. I was just looking. It looks like I'm having some streaming problems. I may have to upload the live stream as a recorded video if it doesn't resolve. I don't know exactly what the problem is, but I am going to get to the actual news clips now, although I guess that was AM Joy, an actual news clip. But the first news clip I want to show you is Christie, former governor of New Jersey, and this is actually kind of political comedy. Well, there's an intentional joke at the end from this other guy on the panel, but Christie keeps attacking the Bush administration staff shakeups as a problem with their transition, that they didn't vet people well enough in the transition. And what never comes up in this entire clip, why I think it's so funny, is that Christie was in charge of the transition, and then he got fired at one point, they say, because he prosecuted Jared Kushner's dad in years past, and then Mike Pence and like Steve Bannon and others took over the transition process where they pick all the people who are supposed to be in the new administration, and that never comes up in this clip, but all along you can hear Christie. What he's basically saying is, the reason they're so screwed up now is because they fired me, although he never really says it, which is why I find this a somewhat amusing clip. You can tell me what you think down in the comment section after we watch it together over here.
So let me begin with you. I'm not sure whether or not this actually is a new phase in the Trump presidency, but clearly he's got a new group around him, people who are much more in tune with what he wants to do.
Well, listen, I think this is what should have happened right from the beginning, and we've spoken about this. The Washington Post story this week on the Presidential Personnel Office tells you everything you need to know. He was ill-served right from the beginning by a group of people who threw all the transition work out, 35 8-inch binders of vetting of over 350 people that were consistent with his views that they got rid of, literally threw in the garbage, George, 3 days after the election and started over. He's been ill-served by that right from the beginning. When he says, I'm starting to get the cabinet I think I want, it's because he's finally being able to get people around him who are consistent with what he thinks and are personality-wise consistent with who he is. He was ill-served by folks like Brennan and Dearborn and others around him in the beginning, and I think he's finally starting to move in another direction.
But the president is operating as if he's on the 26th floor of the Trump Tower.
He's not?
Yeah, he's operating.
This goes back, again, to where we started at the beginning of this conversation. This was a brutally unprofessional transition. This was a transition that didn't vet people for this type of judgment issues, which I think could have been seen very easily in a lot of these people. And you cannot do this with, Rick Dearborn and Steve Bannon on the back of an envelope in 73 days. And the president's been ill-served by this. And if Mr. Pruitt's going to go, it's because he should have never been there in the first place. Listen, I don't know how you survive this one. And if he has to go, it's because he never should have been there in the first place.
In the spirit of Roseanne, to bring us all together here, I think we can all agree we need a more competent level of corruption in the swamp. And we hope the Trump administration can get that fixed.
That is going to have to be the last word right now.
A more competent level of corruption in the swamp. That was a pretty bad joke, but what I thought was a much more amusing joke or inside joke, if you understand what they never really mentioned in that clip. And they started the discussion and ended the discussion with Christie basically saying, the real problem with the staff shakeup in the Trump administration is that they fired me. They fired me, Christie, and if they'd kept me on at the transition, none of these problems with the staff would ever have happened. Or, well, that's what it looked like to me. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And now I'm actually going to get to the news summaries, and actually most of the coverage is news summary. This is Easter Sunday. You'll see they wish everybody happy Easter and happy Passover during many of these news clips, and that's why there weren't very many newsmakers for me to take clips of, but I am going to compare the NBC, the ABC, the CNN, and the Fox News coverage of Trump's tumultuous, troubling, or I don't know, part of it is, one of the things that got focused on in several of the news summaries was Trump getting tough on Russia. And does that mean that, there's no collusion, or that there's his administration's getting tough on Russia, but he himself is being unusually quiet about the toughness on Russia? There's even this story that they told him, don't, even though we're being tough on Russia, don't say anything publicly about it. And then there are the staff shakeups and some other troubles. Of course, the longest news summary, and I think generally the best news summary, and this week is not an exception, I don't think. NBC's Meet the Press. There's one mistake in the middle of this, because remember, today is April 1st, but you'll see Chuck Todd somewhere in this clip refers to the number of people who've been fired this month in the Trump administration. And of course, no one's been fired this month yet, but just a little mistake to look for in this clip.
Easter. It's not exactly a new Cold War, but there's no denying that relations between the U.S. and Russia are clearly at a low ebb. In just the past few weeks, the U.S. and Britain accused Russia of being behind the poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter, and responded with mass expulsions of Russian diplomats. Russia then expelled American and British diplomats, as well as those from some 2 dozen other countries that also participated in expulsions. Now, Russia launched a new intercontinental ballistic missile without notifying the U.S. in advance, and President Trump named Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State and John Bolton as National Security Advisor, both of whom are seen as more hawkish on Russia than their predecessors. But despite the tough steps he's taken, President Trump has remained remarkably muted rhetorically in his public statements about Vladimir Putin. Will his new team, led by John Bolton, change his tune? Still, Mr. Trump seems increasingly confident in the job, unhinged or unleashed, depending on your point of view. And this week, it was the Department of Veterans Affairs that found itself in the president's sights.
That's why I made some changes, because I wasn't happy with the speed with which our veterans were taken care of.
President Trump firing his VA Secretary David Shulkin on Wednesday after what was months of uncertainty.
Better be David. We'll never have to use those words.
But this week on Twitter, President Trump did, naming the personal White House physician Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson, who in January trumpeted the president's health.
He has incredibly good genes, and it's just the way God made him.
To lead the federal government's second largest department. Jackson is already facing scrutiny for his lack of managerial experience.
It's going to be tough. I mean, I'll be frank with you, the odds are not with him.
It's the third firing of a top aide by tweet this month as Mr. Trump reshapes his cabinet, bringing on more combative advisors who he believes will be loyal to him above all. Mr. Trump is freeing himself from constraints, making it clear he intends to write his own rules.
Nobody knows the system better than me, which is why I alone can fix it.
He announced at a political-style rally in Ohio that the United States may leave the battlefield against ISIS.
We'll be coming out of Syria like very soon. Let the other people take care of it now.
That is already raising concerns from allies nervous that the U.S. will cede Syria to Russia and Iran. And it contradicts Mr. Trump's criticism during the campaign of other presidents who signal battlefield intentions in public.
Exactly what are you going to do to beat ISIS, and tell me exactly what is your plan? I said, you know, I have a real chance of winning. I don't like telling you my plan.
Still unclear to what degree Mr. Trump will shift to a more aggressive rhetorical stance on Russia. After a friendly call with Putin last week against the advice of advisors.
I had a call with President Putin and congratulated him on the victory, his electoral victory.
This week, the U.S. expelled 60 top Russian diplomats, punishment for the Kremlin's alleged poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter in England. Some senior Trump administration officials are pressing for even more action, including additional sanctions, as the special counsel's probe into contacts between Russia and Mr. Trump and his aides continue to hang over the White House.
Did you ever discuss pardons? Did you know about the...
And joining me now is Republican Senator
Ron Johnson, and I didn't take a clip from him, but I did think that was a fairly good, straightforward criticism of all the troubles that Trump had in this last week in his presidency, or almost all of them. It's like you can't even cover all the nasty things that happen, and you know, there wasn't much coverage of the whole immigration issue, and that kind of broke as Trump spent Easter tweeting about how he is glad we don't have all these immigrants coming to the country, and about DACA, and that's a topic that I'm not going to get to cover because it happened too late, I think. But if that was like a good criticism for 3.5 minutes from NBC's Meet the Press, this next clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, I guess, is kind of more passive-aggressive. Because they start off saying, well, you know, this is a relatively quiet week for Donald Trump, and then they list almost all the things you saw in the NBC Meet the Press news summary. Not quite as many, because this is about half as long. It's only a little under 90 seconds. But you tell me what you think down in the comment section. I think this is kind of passive-aggressive, same story, but pretending it's not as bad as it is, or it's kind of like, this is, for Trump, this is a quiet week, I guess, over here.
Morning on this Easter Sunday, celebrated by so many Christians around the world. There you see thousands worshiping at the Vatican this morning. We also offer our best wishes to everyone marking the first days of Passover. President Trump is spending the holiday at Mar-a-Lago, capping what passes for a quiet week of his presidency. Sure, it did start with that Stormy Daniels interview and a fresh threat to Trump in the courts. And another cabinet member, VA Secretary David Shulkin, was fired by tweet. Trump's pick to replace him is personal physician, Dr. Ronnie Jackson. And there was that surprise shift on national security. In an Ohio speech supposed to be focused on infrastructure, the president announced for the first time his intention to pull U.S. troops out of Syria soon, blindsiding the Pentagon and the State Department. With so many top advisors heading for the exits, President Trump is happy now to do what he's always done, to say and do what he wants when he wants. And this week at least, he can take some comfort in new poll numbers that show his approval rating creeping into the 40s, a slow but steady climb from recent lows. And we have a great group. Those buses contain some of the 153 Russian diplomats expelled by the West in the wake of that poisoning in Great Britain of a former Russian spy. In return, Russia's expelled 142 Western diplomats from Moscow, one sign of the worst relations between Russia and the U.S. since the days of the Cold War. I want to talk about that and other foreign policy challenges facing President Trump and his team with our panel of experts.
So, yeah, that was the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos clip that, as I told you before when I introduced it, that it's kind of passive-aggressive in my estimation. And by the way, when I was playing the clip, I was reading the live comments along the way, and I saw this one comment here from, wait, where'd it go now? From Remember the Guillotine. What was the Angels singing at 6:55 p.m., which, you know, about 10 minutes into the show, and that was during that NBC Meet the Press clip. That was one thing I forgot to mention. I had the same question. There is this one moment, if you go back and watch that NBC Meet the Press news summary, when, like, there's, like, angelic singing for no apparent reason in the middle of the clip. So, good catch there for my live viewer. Remember the Guillotine. I don't know what Remember the Guillotine means, but thanks for pointing out what I forgot to mention. That's one of the reasons that I have additional fair use media criticism points for my shows, is because I not only add my media criticism and political analysis for my fair use argument, but now that you see those live comments scrolling along as I show the clips, that's like additional media criticism and political analysis that increases the strength of my argument that my use of these corporate media news clips is fair use. I just like to throw that in every now and then as an additional thank you to the live viewers who add in those, because if you add comments as a recorded show viewer, I appreciate that as well, but it actually doesn't. There's a court case that says comments added after the fact don't add to your fair use. But anyway, you have no idea what I'm talking about, or many of you have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm just talking to myself at this point. So now I should probably move on to the next news clip, which is State of the Union. Oh, by the way, you notice in that ABC clip, they didn't really talk about the Russia angle until I edited in a later part of the show where they did finally mention it. In the State of the Union clip, Jake Tapper says the State of the Union is spring cleaning, I guess is what they call the staff shakeup in the White House. And then they mention this story at the end that Trump is being purposely quiet publicly about his tougher approach on Russia, which I will discuss with you after we watch that 1-minute 7-second clip together here.
Happy Easter and happy Passover, everyone. I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, D.C., where the State of our Union is spring cleaning. President Trump continuing to shuffle his cabinet and top White House advisors. The president spending the holiday weekend in Mar-a-Lago, tweeting Happy Easter this morning after playing golf Saturday and dining with Fox News anchor Sean Hannity. The R&R comes after a week of more high-profile administration departures and firings. The president announcing he wants to replace VA Secretary David Shulkin with his White House doctor, Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson, and losing one of his most trusted aides, Hope Hicks. A source telling CNN the president has been advised over the past week that he perhaps doesn't need a communications director at all or a chief of staff. Advice the president reportedly listened to but has neither accepted nor rejected at this time. The staffing shakeups come as the president made a series of surprising moves, catching his own national security team off guard by announcing the U.S. would be getting out of Syria very soon. We'll get exclusive insight into the White House staffing shakeup from the author of a new behind-the-scenes book in moments. But first, I want to bring in independent Senator Bernie Sanders.
I'll have a Bernie Sanders clip a little bit later that's also from CNN's State of the Union. But like I said, I thought that was also a good news summary. And there's that story at the end about Trump keeping, you know, the Russia, that he's being tough on Russia, but being quiet about it because he doesn't want to upset Vladimir Putin, apparently. You can tell me if you think that's fake news or if that's what's really going on. And then the final news summary I'm going to show, this is really brief news summary from Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace does a news summary about the toughness on Russia. And then I'm going to edit over to one of their panel discussions where they highlight a viewer comment, which all about how the toughness, I guess this is basically the message, the Trump, this is Trump TV, Fox News, even Fox News Sunday is pretty much Trump TV, although I'll show, at the end, there's a comment from the AP reporter that balances it out a little bit, which I will discuss with you after we watch that 101-second clip together over here.
Hello again, happy Easter and happy Passover from Fox News in Washington. It's been a turbulent week for President Trump's foreign policy. Russia tested a powerful new missile and responded to the U.S. expelling 60 of their diplomats by kicking out 60 of ours. Kim Jong-un made a surprise trip to China while appearing to set new conditions for talks with Mr. Trump. And the president announced he wants to pull all American forces out of Syria and is freezing recovery aid for that country. We want to discuss all this with Senator Lindsey Graham. We ask you for questions for the panel, and on this issue of relations with Russia and the mass expulsion of diplomats, Lambert Bowman tweeted this: "The only question, does this not put to bed any and all allegations of true collusion? They put him in office, the Kremlin allegedly helping Mr. Trump, to expel people." Catherine, how do you answer Lambert and the argument that the Trump administration is taking action? This shows he's not playing ball with Putin.
Well, certainly the actions this week, the administration took a strong stance. These are very aggressive actions. But there is a disconnect a little bit between the administration's actions and the president's public rhetoric. We haven't heard him directly challenging Putin. And so critics are still pointing to that as a cause for concern. But in terms of collusion specifically, that's just not going to be put to rest until this investigation concludes. We still don't know where that's going, and the people looking closely at this are still waiting to see what Mueller finds.
So thank you, Catherine Lucy from the Associated Press, bringing a little bit of factual and reasonable analysis to the Fox News Sunday panel, and refuting somewhat what the Fox News viewer tweet or whatever it was that I showed in the middle there, where he's being tough on Russia. That means there can't be any collusion, and of course collusion isn't the only issue, as I've covered week after week after week. And in fact, if you want to know more about obstruction of justice, there are many links down in the video description that give more information about obstruction of justice. But at least they did have that AP reporter on there to try to refute that no collusion, no collusion, no collusion, all caps, no collusion argument from the Trump administration that you get so often on Trump TV. And then the next clip I want to show is Senator Lindsey Graham, which you saw Chris Wallace promise. And this is Lindsey Graham backing up the president for being tough on Russia and exhorting that he get even tougher and follow the Reagan model. Of course, Reagan is like the Republican saint, as I've discussed many times in the past, but here is Lindsey Graham and Chris Wallace talking about Saint Reagan and maybe how Trump could become like Saint Reagan in this clip.
Happy Easter, a lot to talk about.
Well, let's start with the situation in Russia, the launch of a powerful new missile, those mass expulsions. Here's how Russia's ambassador to the U.S. described the situation.
It seems to me that atmosphere in Washington is poisoned. It's poisoned. It's a toxic atmosphere.
How serious is the split now between Moscow and Washington?
I think it's pretty ironic that he used the word poison. One of the reasons we're expelling diplomats is because the Russian intelligence services, most likely with Putin's blessing, poisoned a British citizen and his daughter, a former Russian agent in the United Kingdom. So this is the 80s to me all over. I can tell you what Ronald Reagan did. Every time the Russians tried to advance their military technology, we one-upped them. Every time the Russians started running wild throughout the world, Reagan pushed back. So if I were Trump, I'd look at the Reagan playbook and economically isolate Russia. I would study every major recipient of Russia oil and gas and to see if we could find ways to supply those countries with oil and gas somewhere from a source outside of Russia.
I want to pick up on the president's action because while the Trump administration has taken some actions, imposed some sanctions the week before last, President Trump himself has been reluctant to call out Vladimir Putin. In fact, here's how he talked about his call to congratulate Putin after he won his re-election victory. Take a look.
We had a very good call, and I suspect that we'll probably be meeting in the not-too-distant future to discuss the arms race.
Senator, do we need a Trump-Putin summit meeting, or do we need President Trump first to take some stronger actions against Russia?
Let's go back to the Reagan playbook. He stood up in front of the Berlin Wall and said, tear this wall down on the other side's evil empire. Then he wound up meeting with Gorbachev to try to reduce the number of nuclear weapons. I think the problem is that Russia's running wild. Whatever we're doing is not working, and the president, for some reason, has a hard time pushing back against Putin directly. So again, economic isolation of Russia. They're an oil and gas economy. They couldn't survive very long without customers. So if I were President Trump, Germany and Europe, France, I would try to cut off all of their customers and provide alternatives to their customers for oil and gas outside of Russia. That's what I'd do.
Speaking of summits, North Korean leader.
So what do you think? Was it a sanctification of Saint Reagan there, or is it an opportunity for Donald Trump to follow in Saint Reagan's footsteps and be a new Cold Warrior? I mean, that doesn't seem like, I mean, I don't want our president colluding with Russia, but I'm also not really looking for a new Cold War. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And before I leave this topic, and oh, by the way, I have a couple bonus Sandy clips. I'll play one between the topics and then one at the end for the people who missed the one in the middle, because I had people at the end of the show last week complaining about the lack of Sandy clips. So I will play a Sandy clip after this final clip in the Trump trouble topic here. And in this case, the Trump trouble is the firing of the Veterans Administration Secretary Ryan Shulkin. Is it Ryan? I think it's Ryan Shulkin. I know his last name's Shulkin. And he was on a couple of the different shows. I'm not going to take any clips from him, but I am going to show you a clip of Senator Bernie Sanders here talking about why the firing is really about the privatization of the Veterans Administration and why that is really bad for veterans. And I will talk about it with you after we watch that final clip in the Trump Week of Trouble topic. Over here.
Democrat on the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. This week, President Trump fired the secretary of the VA, David Shulkin, announced his intention to hire his White House physician, Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson, to be the head of the VA. Take a listen to what your Democratic colleague, Senator Chris Coons, had to say about Jackson.
The Veterans Administration is one of the largest and most complex federal agencies, and this shows the troubling trend that President Trump has of preferring nominees for his cabinet or cabinet members who are personally loyal or who are telegenic over those who have relevant, deep experience.
Do you share Senator Coons' concerns about Dr. Jackson?
I do, absolutely. But this is part of a broader approach of the Trump administration. Let us be clear. And Dr. Shulkin made this point in an op-ed the other day in the New York Times. And the issue is you have the Koch brothers, the third wealthiest family in this country, who are going to spend some $400 million with their billionaire friends on the coming elections, having enormous power over the Trump administration. And what the Koch brothers believe is not just that we have to privatize the Veterans Administration, they want to privatize Medicare, and the Trump administration had a $500 billion cut in Medicare. They want to privatize Medicaid. They had a $1 trillion cut in Medicaid. They're beginning to go after Social Security. We have a Secretary of Education who does not believe in public education, a Secretary of the Environmental EPA who does not believe in environmental protection. So what you're looking at under the leadership of the Koch brothers is a massive effort to privatize agencies of the United States government and give them over to private corporations. That is what the removal of Shulkin is all about.
So you think that Dr. Ronny Jackson is going to be supporting attempts to privatize the VA?
I think, as Chris Coons pointed out, he has no experience in this area. But I would strongly suspect that if you get rid of Shulkin, who oppose privatization, and you put Dr. Jackson in, that is what his mission will be. And I will tell you this, Jake, I have worked over the years with the American Legion, the VFW, the DAV, and all of the veterans organizations. And without exception, the major veterans organizations say we have got to strengthen the VA, not dismember it, not privatize it. And I will do everything I can as a member of the Veterans Committee not to approve any nominee who is not going to strengthen the VA and who will oppose privatization.
I want to ask you, this week President Trump has been on Twitter hammering.
So there you see Bernie Sanders talking about the new nominee, Dr. Ronny Jackson, and of course the fired VA Secretary, Dr. David Shulkin. Thank you in the live comments, NO8549, for reminding me of the correct name. It's Ronny Jackson, not Ryan Jackson. It's David, or I said it was, anyway, I don't know where I got Ryan from, but anyway, those are the correct names. And the more important argument there from Bernie Sanders is that going on in the background in the Trump administration, there's not only just this whole emoluments clause issue, and if you want to know about the emoluments clause, you probably need to have your own U.S. Constitution. This is my ACLU Constitution that I give out to people who support me on Patreon at $10 a month or more, and there's this emoluments clause issue where Trump isn't supposed to get any money from any foreign sources, but he does, and that's just like the tip of the corruption iceberg, and it's basically a kleptocracy that is going on in the background. Some people say that a lot of this, almost trolling of the American people from the Trump administration, where he hits all these hot button issues, and it's all to like distract people from the real kleptocracy that's going on. And so this whole Koch brothers plan to privatize all these parts of the government, that's an important issue that I'm glad that Bernie Sanders raised there. He was on a couple different shows. That's why I wanted to show that clip, and that's like I said, that wasn't really covered very well other than Bernie Sanders bringing it up, but it's one of the things going on in the background during the Trump troubles, that bad things are going on in the United States government. But there was also bad things going on locally here in Sacramento for the last couple of weeks. And I'm going to get to that topic in a minute, but I did promise one Sandy clip in between the two topics and then one at the end. This is the Sandy clip I recorded when Sandy's actually lying down right there snoring. I don't know, she's intermittently snoring, so I guess last week you did get to hear Sandy barking, but here, when I wasn't sure if Sandy would come and lie down for the show, I recorded this 10-second clip of Sandy eating before the show, right before I started. This is a rare Sandy eating clip for 10 seconds for you over here. Okay, so I hope that sated the appetite not only of Sandy, but of the Sandy fans out there for the Sandy clip. I'll have another 5-second clip of when Sandy actually came and lied down here. But like I said, the next topic, and it is not a light topic at all, although there is going to be one clip I'm going to show that is absurdly amusing in a way. That'll be the CBS Face the Nation clip I'm going to show in a few minutes, where, believe it or not, you're going to see the white Republican from South Carolina talk about how tough it is to be a black man, and he's like sitting right next to the black Republican senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, who never says a word about this entire topic. If you look down in the video description when I listed the guests, I have Representative Trey Gowdy and not Senator Tim Scott on Face the Nation. That'll be sort of a comedy clip in this topic, but it's this real tragic shooting again in Sacramento. I have to emphasize that this is not the beginning of a problem in Sacramento. This is an ongoing problem that's been going on for years. I will show you some evidence of that in just a minute, but I want to start the topic of STEPHONCLARK, who was shot by Sacramento police 2 weeks ago, and then of course there was a protester last night at a vigil who was hit by a Sacramento sheriff SUV and sent to the hospital. So things are not good here in Sacramento. And I want to first say that the Big Five corporate news outlets on their news analysis shows, only 2 of the 5 covered this at all. It was NBC's Meet the Press and CNN's CBS's Face the Nation, and their coverage was so superficial. There was sort of a oblique reference on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. They had Andrew Young on for the upcoming 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. That's on April 4th, and they had like this oblique reference to recent police violence. But the coverage on the Sunday morning news analysis shows of what happened here in Sacramento, and the fact that there was an autopsy this week that showed that what the police said was like total bullshit, that it totally contradicted the idea that that the guy was coming, that STEPHONCLARK was coming towards the police officers in a shooting stance that turned out to be total bullshit from the Sacramento Police Department. And then, of course, last night there was this bullshit action by the Sacramento sheriff, deputy, where they ran over a protester with, well, at least hit a protester with an SUV, who Wanda Cleveland, who thankfully is okay. But like I said, I want to start this whole segment with some good news coverage, not from the normal Big Five corporate outlet shows from the corporate news media, but this is AM Joy, MSNBC. They actually spent a lot more time on what came out about the Alton Sterling shooting in Louisiana, which was a couple years ago. But I edited together the good coverage of what happened here in Sacramento from MSNBC this morning. It's 2 minutes 56 seconds from AM Joy this morning over here.
Police brutality against black men, women, and even children, even if it was missing in the debate following the Parkland shooting, couldn't stay out of the headlines for long. Exactly 2 weeks ago, STEPHONCLARK, a 22-year-old father of 2, was killed by Sacramento police in his grandmother's backyard. He was unarmed. According to a private autopsy requested by the family, Clark was shot 8 times, with all but one of those shots striking him in the back. Police were in the area responding to a report of vandalism.
Certainly what you saw in my hometown was emblematic of what we see in too many communities throughout this country, which is, of course, this systemic bias and, I guess, implicit bias within police departments against communities of color. Now, in Sacramento, where I've been reporting for this entire week, you see a community that is, simply had enough of this. You see people who are, traumatized not simply by the killing of STEPHONCLARK, but also by past killings. Certainly, we had, there was a march on the day of his funeral on Thursday, and a young woman who I spoke with was stuck in traffic by the march, and she got out and supported them because her cousin had been killed by police in Chico, California, which is nearby. So we're talking about a nationwide issue here, and I think Eugene's column, spoke well to that point, and so did April Ryan. I think what the White House is attempting to do here by saying that it's a local matter is to deny the systemic nature of the problem, to say that it's a few bad apples, when in fact we know that's not the case. police.
And we should note that there has been an incident yesterday, the New York Times reporting that a sheriff's vehicle hit a woman at the STEPHONCLARK protest in Sacramento. I want to play, everyone is talking about the local issue thing, and in case our viewers don't know what our guests are referring to, this is reporter April Ryan, asking Sarah Huckabee Sanders if the White House sees this as a national issue. Really quickly, if we can play that.
What does he say about weeding out bad policing when you continue to see these kinds of situations occur over and over again?
In these specific cases and these specific instances, those would be left up to local authorities to make that determination and not something for the federal government to weigh in.
Eric Garner that cried out 11 times, I can't breathe. His mother is still looking for something, an indictment of the police officers in New York. Does the president, has he asked them what's the status? Is it going to, if something's going to happen?
I'm not aware of any specific action. Once again, these would be local matters that should be left up to the local authority.
Very, very quick, I want to give some last word. Jamil Smith, Black Lives Matter has been a lot less active in the Trump era. Any reporting on why and whether or not the intimidation factor from the federal government is playing a role?
Certainly, I don't think that's the case in Sacramento. They've been key to the Build Black movement that's building there. Certainly partnering with other local organizations to do so. So I don't think that that's necessarily an accurate assessment.
There's some sort of streaming problem during that. I hope the live viewers are all still able to see me without the buffering being too bad, but in general, I think that was good coverage. That was the best coverage I could find all morning on the Sacramento shooting here. It was a little weird that MSNBC used the New York Times story about a protester being hit by the sheriff's SUV last night. I don't know why they didn't have access to any video or to any of their own reporting, but I'll show some local reporting on that in a minute. I did really appreciate that reporting from the senior guy from Rolling Stone, Jamil Smith, where he's actually been in Sacramento, and he reported how the activists here are saying enough. You know, it's not just STEPHONCLARK. This has been going on for way too long, and I want to show you, and also about the way that Black Lives Matter, the Sacramento chapter here has been really effective. As you know, there have been several members of the coalition. My ACLU Sacramento chapter has been a peripheral player, but I know some of the central players, and the NAACP has been one of the more central players, and the president of the NAACP, Betty Williams, president here of the Sacramento chapter of the NAACP, was once the chair of the ACLU Sacramento chapter, and I worked with her back then, so I know her. And at the end of this topic, I will show you a couple clips of me talking to the Sacramento City Council and the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors about the need for greater police accountability and transparency. But in terms of what Jamil, is that the right name? Yeah, Jamil Smith from Rolling Stone was saying there about how people in the community are saying enough. I want to show you, this is something Black Lives Matter put together about the 11 people in 11 months, and there was actually one person missing, so it ended up being like 12 people in 2016 who were killed by police in the Sacramento area. And you know, you can see there are different agencies. It's not all the Sacramento Police or Sacramento Sheriff or Highway Patrol, but this has been, and that's just 2016. I'm not even telling you about 2017. And so there have been a lot of people just in the Sacramento area, which is what I thought was the real deficiency in this brief, superficial report from NBC's Meet the Press on what happened in Sacramento. You know, I told you NBC and CBS were both pretty superficial. Well, you'll see this reporter here, Joshua Johnson, who talks about people who've been killed in places other than Sacramento in the last few years, and apparently doesn't know about all these people, and you know, the people before this and the people after this. And So I will criticize what this Joshua Johnson guy says a little more after we watch that 93-second clip together over here.
Back now with Endgame, there were more protests last night in Sacramento after the release of a family autopsy on Friday showing that unarmed 22-year-old STEPHONCLARK was shot 8 times, 6 times in the back, 2 weeks ago in his grandmother's backyard. Now, police video of the shooting showed that police thought incorrectly that Clark was holding a gun, and it is sparking the debate about law enforcement and law enforcement tactics. I want to read, though, something. There's sort of a political reaction here in the relative silence of the president. Jamal Bowie on Slate writes this: Trump is so vocal about what he likes and dislikes, so present in the national conversation, that his omissions are often more revealing than his comments. On the rare occasions when this president is silent, it is consistently when confronted with violence against non-whites. It's a pretty strong statement, Joshua, from Jamil.
It's a strong statement, I think, made even more worrisome by the fact that this part of California should know how to deal with these protests, because these kinds of shootings have happened a lot. Mario Woods in San Francisco, Andy Lopez in Santa Rosa, Oscar Grant in 2009 in Oakland that the movie Fruitvale Station was based on. And for the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office to have no idea how to, A, not know how to deal with these protests, and B, not know how to get a vehicle out of a crowd without hitting a woman on the way out, seems kind of crazy to me. This is one of those moments where you need the Justice Department. You need the federal government to say, listen, this is a trend, this is a larger problem. We need to be able to step in and help local jurisdictions deal with this. I'm waiting to see if Jeff Sessions would step up and do something about this, but now's the time when it's needed.
George?
We also need...
Waiting for Jeff Sessions? That's like waiting for Godot. That's... that ain't gonna happen, at least in my personal opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But as I mentioned before, I showed that clip, Joshua Johnson there mentioned people who have been killed in Oakland and San Francisco, but he apparently doesn't know about all the people killed in Sacramento, and that's not even a complete list. And so I thought that was pretty superficial coverage from NBC's Meet the Press. And, you know, regarding this sheriff's SUV that hit a protester last night, I do have to agree with Joshua Johnson on that, but I also wanted to criticize the breaking news coverage I saw from my local ABC station, ABC 10 KXTV. They showed video of the actual incident I'm about to show you. This is a little over 3 minutes, and they then gave this interpretation that was so pro-police that it seemed like the 2 reporters involved had gotten all their information from the police and were like, they weren't believing their own eyes. They were saying that, you know, the police were driving along, not that they had stopped and then lurched forward. They said that, you know, the video we took shows that it was unintentional, and I have no idea how the video shows that. And, well, you can tell me that I'm going to show you this next clip. This is last night during the 10 Commandments broadcast. You know, ABC shows the movie The 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston, and they broke into the 10 Commandments for this 3-minute special report on the second wave. The Sacramento Police Department were the ones who shot STEPHONCLARK 2 weeks ago. This is the Sacramento County Sheriff's deputy, and the video that you see of what happened seems to be totally misinterpreted by the 2 local news anchors, as I will discuss a little more with you after we watch that clip together here.
On with.
All right, thank you so much. And we are now bringing you a live picture from South Sacramento at 65th and Florin right now, as protesters are joining a massive rally that is growing in numbers at the moment, because they have been blocking down this intersection for about 35 minutes as CHP officers have just shown up in the last 10 minutes or so. And we want to just let you know what led up to this. There was a vigil that happened earlier today that quickly turned into what you were just seeing on your TV. So earlier today, these two Sacramento County Sheriff's deputy patrol cars were driving through. They were telling people to get out of the way. You see the first one here moving very slowly, and they continue to drive forward. Then take a look to the left. It happens very fast, but that protester who was right there on the side of the road was hit. According to our reporter who's on the scene, that woman was taken to the hospital. She is doing okay as far as Giacomo saw. But again, we do not know the extent of her injuries or what happened, what led up to that. But we do want to let you know that officers were making it very loud and clear for people to get out of the way. And again, we wanted to show you some more context of what led up to this moment. If we can play that right now so you can listen in. Again, that protester you saw there on the side was taken to a hospital, a nearby hospital. We do not know her condition, but of course, once we do know if she is okay, we will be sure to update you as well. And now you're taking a live look back at that intersection at 65th and Florin in South Sacramento. A heavy police presence. CHP is here. They are in full riot gear and prepared for any interaction with protesters. And then to your right, as we pan that way, you see a large group of protesters on the side of the road as well. And we have Brandon joining us now, helping us out as we continue to talk about what's happening right now in South Sacramento. And you were at a rally earlier today, so you already kind of got a taste of what people are feeling, what this day has brought. And then the accident we just showed our viewers adds a whole nother layer.
It's absolutely the last thing that this community needed, given just the tension that we've seen, both with last night's demonstration, the marching that we saw downtown, and then today's events, which were admittedly a lot less rancorous. It was people speaking, obviously impassioned at times, but this new incident with a person being hit as part of this thing, while we don't see anything in the video that we recorded to indicate that it's intentional, is certainly something that is going to inflame these tensions. And we understand CHP, the agency that's here trying to clear the road, is the one that'll be investigating that accident.
Absolutely. And again, you were looking at live.
Absolutely. There seemed to be a lot of they really emphasize the that the cops told people to get out of the way. I don't personally know the person who was hit, Wanda Cleveland. I recognize her as someone who I've seen at other protest events that I've attended. I actually haven't been out to any of the protests this week because of, I actually feel bad. Wanda Cleveland is actually disabled. One of the reasons I haven't been out is because I hurt my back and can't really march, and but then I feel pretty shamed by people like Wanda Cleveland who are out there and then get hit by a sheriff's deputy's SUV that really, I don't believe, acted in a proper way. And I don't know Wanda Cleveland personally, although I recognize her, but I do know some of the legal observers who were quoted in the Sacramento Bee, that actually both of the legal observers, one of whom is on my ACLU Sacramento chapter board, and who is trying to help me organize a debate between sheriff candidates and district attorney candidates here in Sacramento County, both of whom are up for election June 5th. There's a June 5th primary in California, and we're trying to organize a debate for these local candidates. So that's something to look forward to. I might have some clips or video from those events on my channel coming up. But before I get to a couple clips of my past involvement in local police accountability in Sacramento, I want to show one more of the corporate news media clips. I already showed the Meet the Press clip that was pretty superficial. This is the one I promised that I almost used as one of my political comedy clips. This is a few clips strung together from Face the Nation, Margaret, Brennan. I mean, give them credit, at least they did cover the Sacramento shooting. There's a little video from the original introduction before Margaret Brennan says, "Good morning, happy Easter," and then she talks about this book that Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, and Trey Gowdy, the congressman from South Carolina, have written together. And then, as I promised, the white guy, Representative Trey Gowdy, is going to talk all about the Sacramento shooting, including talking about how hard it is to be a black guy, while the actual black guy, Senator Tim Scott, just sits there and nods, and he never gets to talk about this entire issue. This is about 2 minutes, 38 seconds, the final actual news clip of tonight over here.
There were protests last night in California over the police shooting of Clark, an unarmed black man. That left one protester injured by a sheriff's vehicle. We'll sit down this morning with two South Carolina Republicans, Senator Tim Scott and Congressman Trey Gowdy, to talk about their new book, Unified, which focuses on bridging America's racial and cultural divide. Welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Margaret Brennan. We begin today with two congressional Republicans from South Carolina, Senator Tim Scott and Representative Trey Gowdy. Their new book, Unified, tells the story of their close friendship and their hope to heal a divided country. Once again, we are seeing protests about the shooting of an unarmed black man and questions being raised about excessive force in the case of Clark. And this question at the White House was responded to with the answer, this is a local matter. Do you think that these conversations need to be had at the federal level? Do you wish that they were, or is that not appropriate?
No, it's a national conversation. I actually took the local matter to be, maybe it's because I'm a prosecutor, that it's a state crime. It's a local law enforcement matter from a criminal justice standpoint, but it's a national conversation. Tim knows my bias, I'll put that word in quotes, is towards law enforcement, as you would expect a prosecutor's to be. I am not oblivious to the fact that there are bad police officers, just like they're bad everything else. He has helped me remarkably. Not just him, but also other people of color in my life have helped me understand every interaction I've had with the police has been because I was speeding. I should have had an interaction with them. I've never been stopped by Capitol Police, and I don't wear a member pin. He's been stopped wearing a member pin. So I am naive to believe that my life experience covers everyone. I have no idea what he sees when he sees blue lights. And I think he's benefited, well, I know he has. He calls the widows of fallen police officers before I call them in South Carolina. So he gets the danger side of it. But he's also a black man who's had a very different relationship with law enforcement than I have. So you ask, why write the book? So we can talk to one another, find the things we have in common instead of racing to the conflict, which is commercially successful, and you get a lot of clicks. It's just destroying our country.
We got to take a quick pause in the conversation. We'll be right back in a moment.
And if you think Senator Tim Scott had any opportunity to speak on that entire issue when they came back, you're wrong about that. But you can check the entire Face the Nation set of clips actually free on YouTube at a link I put down in the video description next to Face the Nation. Oh, I've scared Sandy away for some reason. But that's the last news clip. But I wanted to show a couple historical clips of things that I've said to Sacramento City Council and then the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, trying to get greater police accountability and transparency here in Sacramento. And it raises some of the issues. I think actually the one I did to the Board of Supervisors in November 2017 is better than the one I did in November 2016 to the City Council, which is the, but I'm talking about some of the flaws in the civilian oversight that they tried to set up back in November 2016, which I will talk about a little more with you after I watch this clip of me, which, I don't know, this isn't my best public speaking performance, but I guess I'll watch it with you anyway over here.
City Council, my name is Alan Ash. I'm the chair of the Sacramento area chapter of the ACLU. I'm here to join with the many members of the coalition here to oppose these ordinances as too weak a version of the civilian review and control that Sacramento really deserves. I'm personally a a non-practicing recovering lawyer, but I read the ordinances when they were released last Tuesday, and I sent them off to the ACLU staff attorneys, and they had the same response that I did, that this police commission and the Office of Public Safety and Accountability has no independent investigative authority or power over policy and discipline. The power of OPSA to just audit police investigations is too limited, and its resources to pursue even its limited powers are not well defined. A lot of people have already talked about some of these problems, especially no independent investigation, the so-called alternative procedure that requires the police to do the investigation. One thing I wanted to mention about the alternative procedure is that when people complain to OPSA under these ordinances, they're not protected from police retaliation. We should at least require the police department to coordinate with OPSA regarding contact with people who complain to OPSA and make sure that they only interview those people in the presence of OPSA's staff. I think that's really important to protect people who use that alternative procedure, even though it's not really an alternative investigation. Also, you haven't set the budget and the staff. I think it's really important that the budget should be set as a percentage of the police department budget so that you can't retaliate for critical investigations, and that the OPSA staff has to be made up of skilled investigators who themselves can competently audit investigations. There are a lot of other problems. Unfortunately, in 2 minutes, I cannot go over all the problems with this ordinance, but Sacramento deserves better, and the ACLU opposes these ordinances.
So anyway, that I think I was talking too fast there. I tend to talk too fast. That's like a 2-minute statement to City Council back in November 2016, and they actually adopted some ordinances that increased police transparency. One of the reasons that they're releasing all this video, the body camera video, is back in November 2016. They said that video had to be released within 30 days, and the police chief, Daniel Hahn, actually released it even faster this time, which was at least one thing to give him credit for. But the thing is that there is no real independent investigation of shootings. One thing that really emphasized that to me was when the California Attorney General, Javier Becerra, came in and held a press conference and said he's going to do his own independent investigation of the shooting of STEPHONCLARK. And my question is, well, how come only this shooting gets an independent investigation? What about like all these people from 2016 and all the people before them and all the people after them? It's not like this is the first time Sacramento County or Sacramento needed independent investigation. And so that's the problem. I kept talking about OPSA. That's the Office of Police of Public Safety Accountability, I believe, is what that stands for. That's a couple years ago, so I might not be getting that right, but that was my statement, my 2-minute statement to Sacramento City Council back in November 2016. And then regarding the sheriff, who is even more unaccountable, because, you know, that video you saw from the helicopter of the STEPHONCLARK shooting, that's like the first video the Sacramento County Sheriff has released pretty much ever that I can recall. You know, the rest of it was body camera from the police, the city police, and they have a lot more police accountability. Not enough, as I said in that last statement, but here's my statement from November 2017 about the problems with our sheriff, talking about lack of police accountability in Sacramento over here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Alan Ash. I'm co-chair of the Sacramento area chapter of the ACLU. I don't care if you remember my name. Remember the names Adrian Ludd. Remember Ryan Ellis. Remember Michael McIntyre. Their stories and many others raise questions about sheriff deputies' use of force that our sheriff refuses to answer, even though he has the discretion to let their loved ones know what happened. Fighting that lack of police accountability goes to a core purpose of the ACLU, keeping government power accountable, transparent, and under the control of the people. While this county board formed the Sheriff's Outreach Community Advisory Board back in 2007, the purpose and powers of that body have nothing to do with accountability and transparency, and that's what Sacramento County needs. That's why the local ACLU chapter board voted unanimously to join this group here today and endorse their demands for police accountability and transparency. That's why the thousands and thousands of ACLU members in Sacramento County that I represent, who are your constituents, are asking that this board at least place police oversight on your agenda in the future. Let members of the public tell you about their frustrations getting answers, information, or almost anything from the sheriff's office when the sheriff uses force on them or their loved ones. Do some investigation into how oversight can work. Look at how the LA County Board exercised its power last year to create the County of Los Angeles Civilian Oversight Commission for their sheriff. Look at how voters in San Diego County created its Citizen Law Enforcement Review Board by charter amendment in 1990 for their sheriff. Most importantly, though, police accountability and transparency promote public safety. When policing takes place in the sunlight under community control, the quality of policing increases. When everyone can trust and cooperate with law enforcement, we're all safer. And that's the kind of safety that's not just for the privileged, but for every member of our community.
Thank you, Wallace.
So there's a long history of a need for police accountability and transparency here in Sacramento. That was the point of those last two clips. But I'm really appreciative of all the work that local activists have been doing in the last 2 weeks since the shooting of Stephonclark, especially the people of color in our community who are the most affected by the excessive force by all the area police departments. And hopefully this will be a turning point where the community takes control of policing, and that's basically the point I wanted to make with those clips and with this topic. And I hope you appreciate that analysis and that context, and you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And before I leave, Sandy's back lying down again. I don't know why she left for a moment there, but I did promise one more Sandy clip. This is when Sandy originally came and lied down at the beginning of the show. 5 seconds, and then I'll finish up and say goodbye over here. So there you go, 2 bonus Sandy clips and 2 topics for an April 1st Passover, Easter, or, you know, if you're an atheist or a Hindu or a Muslim, you can tell me what holiday you are or are not celebrating. But I got to finish up the show. It's been another one of those long days. And next week, there's actually an ACLU conference here in Sacramento, so I may be starting the show a little bit late. I don't know, maybe I'll try to cut out just the Sacramento police shooting part of this video and upload it as a separate video. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. Let me know what you think about all the clips I picked out. I appreciate all the live viewers, my viewers of the recorded show, those who support me on Patreon. You can also just give me a supportive comment or thumbs up down there. And until next week, or until I upload some other edited, produced video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.